The Titanic carried three types of lifeboats: two emergency cutters, four collapsible boats, and 14 wooden boats. However, the question is, where did they go after the disaster? So, a quick recap will be that there were a total of 20 boats, and of these, only 18 were picked up by the Carpathia. Both collapsibles had to be abandoned before they could be rescued. And of these 18, the Carpathia took 13 to New York. And these 13 were 11 wooden boats and both emergency cutters. So they left 5. They didn't pick them up. The 14th boat was the RMS Oceanic's recovered collapsible A. So the Oceanic was basically passing when they found this collapsible boat and they picked it up. I have discussed the whole story in detail in my video part 15, Recovery of Bodies. So you can check that out for details. Suffice to say, these boats mysteriously disappeared from records after December 1912. But there's something interesting here. So before they disappear from records, we have some insurance claim documents where you can see the amount claimed and the amount they have changed it. The amount claimed and the amount that was decided after checking has been reduced. So some people think that the boats, because of exposure to water, apparently they were kept in the dock all the way from April till December, and because of that they just decomposed and they were just sold for scrap after December. Now the 15th boat was the collapsible B. The Mackie Bennett recovery ship found it upturned, so first they tried to flip it in order to look for trapped bodies, but they couldn't flip it, so they just chopped a hole with their axes and sank it. Now that leaves 5 boats unaccounted, namely the two more collapsibles and 3 wooden boats. Now on the 23rd of April, westbound steamer Royal George came across a collapsible boat in a rotten state. But the thing is, the location of this boat was the opposite of where the Mackie Bennett had seen the collapsible be. So this must have been a different collapsible, maybe collapsible A. Now, the captain of Mackie Bennett also mentions that he came across 2 empty lifeboats during the recovery operations, and neither of these had occupants or were overturned. So this is proof that these were neither collapsibles A or B because, as we remember, A had occupants and B was overturned. And a publication in the Daily Herald newspaper dated 20th May says that passengers who came to Plymouth, they mentioned seeing an empty Titanic lifeboat on their way as well. Then in October of the same year, a French newspaper mentions that the captain of a 3-masted ship named Cape Liban saw a large lifeboat with the words Titanic 15 Liverpool on it. And he also said he found this boat close to an iceberg, which is quite interesting because many ships reported seeing wreckage to the north of the crash site in the days following sinking. But this is like much later, all the way in October. Now, there are some things that are worth discussing about this. First of all, we do find a 3-masted ship named Cape Leo, not Cape Liban. So maybe Liban is a misspelling of Leo. Lloyd's registers mention that this was a wooden schooner, but they don't mention its transatlantic journeys, and there's a reason for that. The reason is because Lloyd's do not mention categories of ships like yachts, coasters, and sailing ships. And because this was a sailing ship, they don't mention if it traveled transatlantic or not. So unfortunately, we have reached a dead end. Then there's the Bahamas lifeboat of October 1913. So you may have seen this picture, and in case you haven't, this is actually kept in the Lord Macquarie collection at the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich. So this picture has a caption, Titanic collapsible recovered in the Bahamas, 18 months after the disaster by RMS Port Kingston. And with it, there's a letter from Herbert Hill given to Walter Lord, the famous Titanic historian. Now there are some issues with this story, with this whole picture actually. So there was a ship named Port Kingston. It existed. It was built in 1904 and was owned by the Imperial Direct Line, and they sold it to the Union Steamship Company of New Zealand in 1911, and it was renamed Tahiti. Now, at the time of Titanic disaster, the Tahiti was operating on the North America to Australia route. But here's the thing. Researcher Campbell McCushan notes that the builder's plate on the ship on which this photograph was taken, it actually mentions the builders as Workman Clark of Belfast. But we know that RMS Port Kingston, that was later renamed as Tahiti, was actually built by Alexander Stephen and Sons of Clydebank. So this picture must have been taken on another ship. And according to Campbell, this is a ship belonging to Elders and Fifes, which by 1913 had taken over the Kingston to Avonmouth run, and they had numerous vessels built by Workman Clark Company. The shipslist.com confirms this, and it also mentions that Port Kingston had been renamed Tahiti. And Lloyd's registers show us that the Tahiti was sailing on the North America to Australia route in October of 1913. Now the question is, if this ship on which the photograph was taken was the Imperial Direct Line's Port Kingston, which was later renamed as Tahiti, then what ship was it exactly? Well, the thing is, we can't tell for sure because Lloyd's records are very ambiguous about the dates of Elders and Fives ships, which unfortunately means we have again reached a dead end. Did they have a ship named Port Kingston? We can't tell for sure, but the crewman who wrote this letter to Walter Lord, he mentions the ship as RMS Port Kingston of Elder Dempster Limited on a voyage to Kingston in Jamaica. So according to the crewman, this ship did exist. But then we don't find records of it anywhere. And like I mentioned earlier, the records of Elders and Fives ships are very ambiguous that we have. So maybe this ship existed, but we just can't find it on our records. Because of that, once again, we reach a dead end. Now you will ask, what about the last known sighting of Titanic's adrift lifeboats? That's like no. So that's probably done on 2nd of July 1913. The publication mentions that German steamer Eisenach was sailing to Baltimore when they came across an upturned lifeboat covered in barnacles, and it was very close to the spot where the Titanic sank. So it was probably from the Titanic. And after that, we don't find any mentions of Titanic lifeboats anymore.